Well, good morning, friends. Our first item of business today is, as you all know, our previous chair has slid over a seat, so we need to elect a chair and vice chair for LSAC as we move forward. So at this time, we will take nominations from the floor and proceed with the election of a new local superintendent's advisory council chair and vice chair. And with that, I would like to nominate Kirk Biggerstaff for the position of chair. Are there any other nominations? If not, we will close nominations. Given there's only one name on the slate, is there a motion to approve the slate and elect Kirk Biggerstaff as chair of the LSAC?
So moved. Congratulations.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll make that second.
Meredith, if you would, please call the roll.
Brian Alexander.
Present.
Superintendent Alexander, we're actually voting for the chair. So if you could just vote yes, I apologize. I apologize. Kirk Biggerstaff.
Yes.
Harry Burchett.
Yes.
Tom Cochran.
Yes.
David Cox.
Yes.
Will Hodges.
Yes.
Sheila Mitchell.
Yes.
Karen Solis. I think Superintendent Solis is working on audio right now, so we can come back and record her vote. Russ Tilford.
Yes.
Henry Webb.
Yes.
Congratulations. Would you like to relocate?
I'll move chair.
Thank you all. I am honored to be selected for the chair. This is my 10th year as superintendent. Dr. Robbie and I kind of came in together in the same cohort, and it's been a great opportunity to serve on LSAC. I'm starting my second term, and I look forward to working with you and this body as we make important policy decisions. At this time, we need nominations for vice chair. Do we have any nominations for vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Harry Burchett for vice chair.
All right, Harry Burchett has been nominated. Do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
All right, any discussion? All right, let's have a roll call vote.
Brian Alexander.
Yes, this time.
Kirk Biggerstaff.
Yes.
Harry Burchett.
Harry Burchett, yes.
Tom Cochran.
Yes.
David Cox.
Yes.
Will Hodges.
Yes.
Sheila Mitchell.
Yes.
Karen Solis. Okay, we're still working on audio there. Russ Tilford.
Yes.
Henry Webb.
Yes.
Okay, Chair.
All right, congratulations, our vice chair, Dr. Harry Burchett.
Thank you.
Do you have any remarks for the committee?
Just this is my second term on LSAC. It's very important responsibility as we help the department review and craft regulation to meet the statutory requirements from the legislature and while we meet the needs of our students. And that's an important thing that we're here for. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Glad to be here to support Dr. Fletcher.
Absolutely. Up next, we invite Commissioner Fletcher to provide an update from the Kentucky Department of Education.
Thank you, Chairman Biggerstaff. First of all, I want to make a comment. There was no snide comments made about the vice chair who retired with David Riley. You know, the commissioner slid over a chair, but nobody said anything about David. So again, congratulations to David on his retirement. I think he's in the Northeast. So again, congratulations to him too. It was an honor to serve in this capacity as LSAC chair, but also to serve with David and with everyone at the table too. And those that have gone on, it's been an absolute honor to sit in that chair and just as much an honor to sit in this chair. So thank you folks for the support, not only as chair, but also as commissioner. We do have a long agenda, so I'm going to try to cut my remarks down to a minimum as we move forward. Just an update from us. The accountability system, the Kentucky United We Learn Council, has been in full force. We had a convening yesterday. We reviewed prototypes 1 and prototypes 2, and I know all superintendents have received an email about those 2 prototypes. We've asked for input. I think we've had input for, we've had 75, I think, responses. Now, some of those may be overlapping between DACs and superintendents from the same district. So I really encourage more superintendents as we move forward for input. Please have more input as we go forward. We really appreciate that. But also thank you to those that have done that with your district. So I know I've talked to several of you and several of the other superintendents that met with their teams, their administrative teams, to review and to give very thoughtful, thorough input. So we're really appreciative of that. Now, as far as what's next with the accountability system, there'll be a 3.0 version based on the input that was given by not only superintendents and DACs, but also by the Cool Council yesterday. And it'll have a few more decision points in it. And then we'll also go to the Kentucky Board of Education for more input from KBE. And we'll look at a 4.0, and then we'll begin our study phase. When we talk about 4.0, what does this look like? Again, it's not saying this is the direction we're going. It may say everyone seems, or at least over 90% of the people that we've talked to are very interested in student growth as opposed to the change element. So that seems to be a decision that we're moving towards. But there's some other areas that may be 60-40 or 50-50 that we're going to have more study, more inputs before we make some decisions, and we need that from districts. So that 4.0 will come out, and then we'll have our L3 districts. I think we have 18 L3 districts. I'd like to ask 18 other districts to be involved in that so that we have a balance of these are people that may be in the work of looking at everything from their portrait of the learner to their own accountability systems, which I know that Kenton County has a very involved system of its own. Also districts like Shelby County. We also have Greenup County. We also have Logan County. There's so many across our state that are doing some great local accountability work, and we want that input. So once we do that study phase, then there'll be some next steps that we'll decide on as we move forward. But again, we want an accountability system that we all can believe in and trust in. We may not agree with every single part of it, but at least we want that input to say this is where we're going. Okay. The second item that I wanted to share was I had the opportunity to attend the National Forum on Education Policy in my second week as commissioner, and I was really impressed with the people that we had presenting there. I had the opportunity to watch Representative James Tipton, who presented on the numeracy bill, who did a phenomenal job representing the Commonwealth and having the input. So I was really impressed with the work there. And also Reagan Satterwhite, who represented KDE as part of the middle school initiatives that we have with CTE, did a phenomenal job. Reagan represented CTE and Dr. Hargis in our department very well. So thank you for that. Also, too, is a great opportunity to see our Lieutenant Governor in action. She did a great job of being a student that week and attending different sessions to learn more about policy on a national scale. And of course, I had the opportunity to learn as I went through too. But it was an honor to support Representative Tipton and also Ms. Satterwhite in that policy and being in the stands, if you will. The next thing too is CTE funding. As everyone at this table and all of our superintendents know that we had some revisions that we need to make. We did an internal review and there was some mistakes. We're very close to having a finished product that I'm very thankful that not only CTE has been working night and day on, but also too our Office of Finance and Operations have been reviewing that information and working as a team. We're so thankful for that work together. But also too, as we move forward, we want to make sure that we get everyone the formula and make sure everybody understands the formula. And we want to give you the numbers so that you can see how they're calculated. Now, some of you can dive right in and give us probably a better explanation than maybe even some of the people here at the department. But we want to make sure that everyone has a full understanding of how those numbers are developed, but give you an opportunity to check our work, if you will, to make sure that those numbers make sense. The next item is I want to talk a little bit about is the SEEK Roadshow. We've talked I've talked with several superintendents over the past year about how do we better inform not only our superintendents, but also our district leaders. This is what the SEEK formula is. This is how it works. If you have an increase in student attendance, how does that impact your SEEK? And most people can calculate that, but what about an increase in Tier 1? Maybe how does a decrease or increase in property value? How does that happen? You know, who gets Tier 1 funding, who doesn't? What's the difference between a 15% on Tier 1 and a 17.5%? But we want to make sure that everyone has that opportunity to understand the SEEK formula, but also talk to legislators because lots legislators will call us, but they'll also call you to say, what does this mean within the SEEK formula? How does that impact? And we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. The approach that we're going to take is we're looking at having 4 sessions in the fall. Matt, correct? And we're looking at trying to put 2 pairing co-ops together. And the reason for that is I think surveys have already gone out to see, like, let's say KVEC and Southeast South Central. They probably have a lot of the same issues as it relates to funding, so it makes sense to put those 2 co-ops together possibly. But also, 2, asking districts what they want to know about with SEEK so that we can kind of cater each of those stops with each other. So looking forward to that. The other thing that I was really excited about is as we work with the new company on SEEK formulas of having that sandbox. Now we have this capability. Honestly, I didn't know this as a superintendent, but where your numbers are populated, everything from the add-ons to your property values, your per students, your numbers, and all those student attendance, ADA, and then it gives you your numbers. But we also want to give you that opportunity to have that sandbox where if you change a number, how does that look like? What does that look like as your final number? So that you're seeing trends in your districts and you're able to make those decisions. Now, so many of our superintendents, I think of David Gillum, who could give us those numbers without anything from KDE, and people around this table can too. But at least we have that opportunity so that you see your numbers, you have this increase or this decrease, and how does that impact your SEEK? So we want you to be able to do that without changing the numbers at the state level, of course. But again, very excited about the SEEK Roadshow. Also, too, just for a moment, the first month as commissioner has been a blessing. I want to take the opportunity to thank the members of the Kentucky Department of Education. You guys have welcomed me wholeheartedly. You've supported me. You've answered my silly questions that many of you might be like, why didn't this guy know this? And then other times, I hope I've surprised you along the way, too, with some other items. I've tried to listen. I've been very impressed with the people I've worked with, and I didn't expect any less. But again, to see that in action has been a blessing. But also, too, I've had the opportunity to talk at the KSBA Summer Institute, the KASA Leadership Institute. Being out to connect with people, I think is what I need to do as commissioner. Shake hands, make sure that they know they're being listened to, but make those connections and those relationships. But also, too, I want to thank who's on vacation right now, Robin Kinney. Robin Kinney has been an absolute godsend in her role. She's serving as an executive advisor, but she's taken a very well-deserved vacation. I think after 2 weeks of working with the new commissioner, she needed a rest. So very thankful for her. The only other item I'll add is some of the other things that are going on. There's been a lot of one-on-one meetings, direct reports with leadership here between the commissioner and leadership of this is how things operate. How do we hold each other accountable? What are some things that you expect of the commissioner? What do I expect of you? But also, too, we've incorporated we've changed our leadership meeting to be more about cross-agency. How do we work with each other? How do we, this is a topic that needs to be elevated to this group. What input do we have as a group? So we basically have one group meeting. We have another leadership meeting, but a larger leadership meeting that's more about cross-agency. How do we support each other? How do we help each other? And how do we work together? But also the direct reports so that, okay, this is what the commissioner needs to be aware of. And this may be some action items that I need to take action on. So that being said, I'll be happy to answer any type of questions that you may have. Just a few items to kind of bring you updates from KDE.
Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Fletcher? I would just like to say on behalf of the council, I think I can speak on their behalf to say that we've been very impressed, as we knew we would be, with you as the new commissioner. And I think that the feedback that I've been hearing is that you have been building relationships and you've been making connections, and that's exactly what needs to be done. So we would just like to applaud you and hope that you continue to do great things for Kentucky, as we know you will.
It's very kind of you, sir. Thank you.
Now we have 2 policies for our review and action. First, we welcome Dr. Beth Hargis and Beth Engel from the Office of Career and Technical Education.
Good morning. Beth Engel is here, and she's going to walk you through our annual ATC policy updates. I believe there are 13.
Thank you, Dr. Hargis. Good morning, everyone. The Office of Career and Technical Education contracts with the Kentucky School Board Association to maintain the Kentucky Tech Policies and Procedures Manual, as well as provide legislative-related updates and suggestions. 13 of our Kentucky Tech policies have been proposed or have proposed updates to align with legislative changes. Those changes were provided in the portal for your review, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have over those.
Any questions? All right. Do I have a motion to approve the annual amendments to the Kentucky Tech Policies and Procedures?
Harry Burchett, Harrison County, I make that motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Will Hodges, Green County, second.
Any discussion? At this time, we will have a roll call vote.
Brian Alexander,
Yes.
Kirk Biggerstaff,
Yes.
Harry Burchett,
Yes.
Tom Cochran,
Yes.
David Cox, Will Hodges,
Yes.
Sheila Mitchell,
Yes.
Karen Solis, Russ Tilford,
Yes.
Henry Webb.
Yes.
Thank you all. Up next, we invite Greta Hilton and Shannon Spartman from the Office of Special Education and Early Learning to the presenters table.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We actually have Melody Cooper with us this morning instead of Shannon Sparkman, so I just wanted
Welcome, Melanie.
to share that.
Thank
We
you.
had a
And
bit of a
Shannon's
change.
online there.
Yep. So we too contract with KSBA for the annual policy update, and you also have in your packet a summary of the changes and any fiscal impact that those changes might cause. And so those are there for your review.
Do we have any questions? All right, do I have a motion to approve the annual policy adoptions and amendments for the Kentucky School for the Blind and the Kentucky School for the Deaf?
So moved.
Oh, well, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
And we've got a second. Any discussion? All right, let's do a roll call vote.
Brian Alexander,
Yes.
Kirk Biggerstaff,
Yes.
Harry Burchett,
Yes.
Tom Cochran,
Yes.
David Cox,
Yes.
Will Hodges,
Yes.
Sheila Mitchell,
Yes.
Karen Solis. Superintendent Solis, we actually are just getting feedback from your audio feed right now. I apologize. But we did, I saw you mouth yes, so I will record the vote as such. Okay. Russ Tilford,
Yes.
Henry Webb.
Yes.
All right. Now we have several regulations for our review and action. Up first, we have 2 action items from the Office of Career and Technical Education presented by Dr. Beth Hargis and Reagan Satterwhite.
Good morning again. We have 2 regulations for which we are proposing amendments, and Reagan will discuss these changes with you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Both of these amendments are from Title 780. In April, we brought 8 regulations in front of you from Title 780. We are on a cleanup tour of this entire title. This title was established when the Office of Career and Technical Education was actually part of the Workforce Development Cabinet. And so in 2012, we became a part of KDE, and we are still working to kind of conform those regulations that were pre-existing to our processes here in the department, and the area technology centers being under the Kentucky Department of Education. So both of these regulation and the proposed amendments are cleanup in nature. The first one, attendance, comp time and leave for certified and equivalent service, applies to teaching and supervisory administrative staff in the area technology centers. Some of the things that we did update within our proposed regulation is to remove the cap on professional development days. The current language allowed for up to 2 PD days for staff, and we have removed that cap. We've aligned the working time with 7.5 hours, which is standard to the KDE working hours, as well as consistent with local districts as well. We have removed any reference to overtime. Teaching and administrative staff do not receive overtime pay, nor do KDE staff. We have left some references to comp time, although teaching and administrative staff do not earn comp time. We've addressed in the regulation what happens if they were in a role that received comp time and then switch into a teaching or administrative role. That comp time is then frozen, so that if they were to then leave that role and go back to a role in the department, they would still have that accumulated time. We've also updated some sections just to be simply more user-friendly. We've separated some types of leave into separate sections so that the regulation is more easy to follow, and updated the FMLA based on the federal guidelines. For the second regulation, the extent and duration of school term, use of school days, and extended employment, we simply updated this regulation to model how we do operate in today's world, that when school is closed, there's still multiple opportunities to have multiple instruction, and clarified that our area technology centers follow the lead of the local districts for the students they serve in those centers. So nothing that we have changed would be any procedural change to the current daily operations in our tech centers. But if you do have any questions, we would be happy to address them.
Any questions or discussion? Do I have a motion to approve the amendments to 780 KAR 3072 attendance, comp time, and leave for certified and equivalent service, and 780 KAR 3080 extend and duration of school term, use of school days, and extended employment? That was a mouthful.
Sure is.
I'll make that motion.
We've got a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
And we've got a second. Any further discussion? Let's do a roll call vote.
Brian Alexander,
Yes.
Kirk Biggerstaff,
Yes.
Harry Burchett,
Yes.
Tom Cochran,
Yes.
David Cox,
Yes.
Will Hodges,
Yes.
Sheila Mitchell,
Yes.
Karen Solis, Russ Tilford,
Yes.
Henry Webb.
Yes.
Thank you all. We now invite KDE Deputy Commissioner and General Counsel Todd G. Allen to the table to present a proposed amendment to 702 KAR 1116.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning.
So this amendment to regulation relates to the annual in-service training for your district board members. As you may be aware, House Bill 449 from the 2024 legislative session made some changes to required training for district board members. Some of your board members have probably already undergone that training specific to ethics and the Open Meetings or Open Records Act. I think KSBA was doing some of that over the summer. But this is to amend our regulation to bring that in line with the changes to statute. So just high level, we have taken out the hour requirements based on years of service, because all of that is already provided in the statute, so we don't need to copy it again into the regulation. That will be the source for the number of hours based on years of service. And then we specify that, again, KSBA remains the primary provider of training for your district board members, and they have to offer those 4 topics that are mentioned in the statute at least once every year, and then there are about 10 other topics that they have to rotate and hit at least once every other year. I'll pause there and see if you all have any questions.
Any questions? All right. Do I have a motion to approve the proposed amendment to 702 KAR 1116, annual in-service training of district board members?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And we've got a second. Any discussion? At this time, we will have a roll call vote.
Brian Alexander,
Yes.
Kirk Biggerstaff,
Yes.
Harry Burchett,
Yes.
Tom Cochran,
Yes.
David Cox,
Yes.
Will Hodges,
Yes.
Sheila Mitchell,
Yes.
Karen Solis, Russ Tilford,
Yes.
Henry Webb.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Up next, we have One action item from the Office of Finance and Operations presented by Matt Ross, Shay Ritter, and John Gilbert.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
So this is an amendment of 702 KAR 4090. It's the property disposal. Just as CTE's on a journey to clean up one of their titles, we are on a journey to revamp all of our facilities regulations. I know some of you that have been on this, we've brought stuff before, we've talked about other issues. I think the goal was to work to create a more linear, clear path for facilities all the way through. Of course, we've layered onto that House Bill 678 concepts. We were really hoping they would go ahead and make that law. Instead, they punted it down the road and still it's temporary for a few more years. So working within all those constraints, we're still determined to make an easier process for facilities, a clearer, linear. I think I'll let them go through sort of what we've done here, but the backbone of property disposal is always going to be, because of the underlying law, is that it must be surplus to the needs of your district and you must generally receive fair market value. So this is all about how you get to that point that you can dispose of property and still be under the law, with providing some record of that for us without being unduly burdensome to your districts. So I'll let Che and John go ahead.
Sure. Thank you. I think the key word here is we're trying to shoot for consistency. And I think I give credit to staff for really going through a lot of these regs. And this is not a threat, but we'll be back in the next couple of months with a lot more regs. Don't get too excited about that. And I'm going to let my colleague here, John Gilbert, talk a lot about the detail. But two things I really want to point out is we're trying to push these regs and the consistency into FactPack, a system that a lot of you all know, mostly for documentation. This is going to be consistent throughout our regs, moving a lot of paper submissions and things like that will all be pushed into FactPack, but also waivers, which right now most have to go to the Board of Education, which meets every 2 months. With their blessing, we're sort of revamping that so waivers can come to KDE, get a quick review, and if we approve it, it's done within minutes, literally. Otherwise, if we don't agree, it can be appealed. So you'll notice that consistency in almost every regulation that we're revamping. We want to make it the responsiveness to be super fast to you all, to realize real estate markets move, construction moves very quickly, and so do prices. So I'm going to let John go through the highlights here.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. The reg is designed to try to give a step-by-step process and to also give a linear process to be able to incorporate into the FactPack system, just like construction is. Like currently, you do construction, you have what we call a BG1, and you do it the first of the project. And with disposal, it's not in the system, it's not documented through that system. Where the state has a vested interest in these things, we're required to have deeds when you acquire things. We also need that information when you sell things. So to have everything within the same systems and the same process, and starting everything with a BG1 first thing, and going through that whole process gives consistency. It's not at the beginning, one's at the beginning, one's at the end, one's in the middle. It's everything's at the beginning. So not only as we talk about disposal and starting with like a BG1 process, and the construction starting with the BG1 process, the acquisition would also start with that, so that it isn't one or the other, or people are guessing all the time where that is. Everything starts at the same starting point in the same system that a lot of facility directors are familiar with, and it's in the same infrastructure for reporting purposes. Some of the things from 678, like the 30 days, that we have written into the regulations so that we as KDE keep those obligations when we review things upon a complete submittals. We will, per the regulation, maintain those kind of that intent from 678, which is now 727. Also, there's been recent legislation for not the department, but local districts to work with other governmental or quasi-governmental agencies. That's not been addressed by regulation. The department does not rule on those or give approvals, but in the same sense, we do need information for record keeping and data collection. So through that same process, we'll be gathering that information. we won't be giving approvals, but you'll be through the same portals and same information. Through this regulation, it will give clear language to address, to be able to provide that information in those systems. And also, like Chase said, waivers and appeals are also something that I think a lot of parties would like to see in terms of helping to streamline the process. Instead of going to the state board, you can go to the department on some of the minor things. And if there are some larger serious issues that can be appealed to the state board if desired. I think that's pretty much it. Do you all have any questions?
I think the key word there is streamline. We want to make sure we get some quick turnaround as much as possible and get back to you as quickly as we can.
Any further discussion? Do I have a motion to approve the proposed amendment to 702 KAR 4090 property disposal?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second. This time we'll do a roll call vote.
Brian Alexander,
Yes.
Kirk Biggerstaff,
Yes.
Harry Burchett,
Yes.
Tom Cochran,
Yes.
David Cox,
Yes.
Will Hodges,
Yes.
Sheila Mitchell,
Yes.
Karen Solis, Russ Tilford,
Yes.
Henry Webb.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Our next action item is a proposed amendment to 704 KAR 3305, minimum requirements for high school graduation, presented by Thomas Tucker, Mickey Ray, and Sarah Peace from the Office of Teaching and Learning.
We do have an error on our agenda. It is Mickey Marinelli now.
Yes,
So,
Commissioner. I'm
so
now
just
an
wanted to
old married
correct that.
lady, superintendent.
Good morning, everyone. Morning, members of LSAC, and congratulations to Chair Biggerstaff. I know you're doing an outstanding job. We're here this morning to talk about amendment to 704 KAR 3.305, minimum requirements for high school graduation as it relates to civics education. And my two outstanding colleagues will walk you through our short presentation. Mickey, Sarah?
Yes, good morning, Commissioner, Chair Biggerstaff, Vice Chair Burchett, members of the committee. If we can go to the next slide. I want to set the context for why we are bringing the amendments forward to the minimum high school grad reg for you today. There was a bill that was passed in the 2024 session, House Bill 535, that made a change, and we feel it actually allows for more flexibility at the local level around civics education. Certainly, we are all supportive of creating engaged citizens as part of the K through 12 progression for education. And so now, per this statutory change, local districts will be deciding between students receiving a half credit civic literacy for education or maintaining the passing of the civics test. On the next slide, it goes into just a little bit more detail about that. So this does begin with students entering grade 9 for the 25-26 school year. And so local boards may choose one of those two options. And I wanted to spotlight for you on this slide, there is linked supplemental guidance that Sarah Peace oversaw as our policy advisor, just providing support. We tried to anticipate questions you might have around this policy change and the considerations that you would want to think through. The half credit course, it may be included as a standalone credit, or you could include that in the existing 3 social studies credits. But if it stays within the 3 social studies credits, we'll want to ensure that the civic standards are covered, of course, and the requirements of 151 or 158.141. And so all of that is really sort of fleshed out for you in that supplemental guidance, and wanted you to have access to that and knowledge that that exists. But I'm actually going to turn it over to Sarah. She's going to talk to you about the specific amendments to 3305 that will now align us to these statutory changes.
Thank you. We can go to the next slide. So the change that's made to the regulation itself is really just very simple. Previously, it stated pass a civics test as required by KRS 158141. Now it will simply say successfully meet the civics requirement. So depending on the choice of the district to either do the test or the half credit course, it will work either way in terms of the student and how the regulation is written. And then on the next slide, we had a couple of other technical amendments that we did while the regulation was open. One of them is just to conform to 158142, which establishes the early graduation program. There's language under Part 2 that requires students to submit a letter of intent form. We have provided this form. It's the same form that we have provided in the past, but KRS Chapter 13A drafting requirements requires us to include that as material incorporated by reference. And so that's just a technical change now that we've added the intent form itself as a material incorporated by reference, but like I said, no changes to the form. And then we've also cleaned up some language. I'm very excited to share that the old graduation requirements for students who entered grade 9 in 1819 are removed. And so that's the type of cleanup language you'll see throughout the regulation if it's outdated or if it's just to improve readability. And if there are any questions, I believe that's it.
Yep.
Any questions? Do I have a motion to approve the proposed amendment to 704 KAR 3305, minimum requirements for high school graduation?
I'll make a motion.
We've got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. At this time, we will have a roll call vote.
Brian Alexander,
Yes.
Kirk Biggerstaff,
Yes.
Harry Burchett,
Yes.
Tom Cochran,
Yes.
David Cox,
Yes.
Bill Hodges,
Yes.
Sheila Mitchell,
Yes.
Karen Solis, Russ Tilford,
Yes.
Henry Webb.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We will now invite Rhonda Sims and Jennifer Larkins from the Office of Assessment and Accountability to present two regulations for our consideration.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Great to see you again. I have with me Jenny Larkin, who's the Policy Advisor for the Office of Assessment and Accountability. And we have, again, kind of the theme of the day, some cleanup. And the first reg we're going to talk with you about today is the Administration Code. You're familiar with this. This is the reg that you train on every year. Its real focus is to ensure there's consistent administration of the state assessment. That's kind of a federal expectation. But we needed to update it a little bit with language. This reg existed in 2014, and we've come a long way, baby, with online testing since then. So we need to reflect that online testing within the regulation. We also have Beth Bales online with us today. There are a few clarifications that have just come up as confusion points during test allegations. So we've also tried to tweak those just a little bit with suggestions from the Office of Legal Services. But the main focus is to update language so that people understand if I have a SEAL code, which is the code to get into an online test, that's a secure material, just like a test booklet would be a secure material. So it's really kind of bringing us into a more modern era of testing. And so Jenny is going to, if you'll go to the next slide, Meredith, that'll just remind us of what this reg does. Again, it's to assure that there's consistent administration of the assessment across the state. And the code applies to all administrations that lead to accountability reporting. So any kind of assessment that ends up in the accountability system, you need that one-time training at the beginning of the year for this. So Jenny's going to walk us through the changes that we want to highlight for you.
Sure. And the first change, I don't know if you can hear me or not. The first change, as Rhonda mentioned, is related to the idea that we now have online testing. And so since the administration code has the major theme is test security, we want to make sure that those materials, test tickets, and SEAL codes are treated with secure practices. Then also, if you'll move to the next slide, please, Meredith, we see on the second bullet here that There are also some minor differences in the way that a paper test is administered versus the way an online test is administered. So we want to make sure that we account for the differences in that. Then we want to clarify language based on interactions during the allegation process. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on the upcoming 2 slides. And then, because as Rhonda said, this hasn't been updated in 10 years, we want to just make sure that we go through and update all the outdated languages and make technical changes.
So
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say Meredith moved ahead for you.
Thank you. So the first change to the allegation process is fairly simple. We have a section, and you'll see it here on the slide, that's in brackets and italicized font, that we would like to delete. And it basically lists 4 different things that currently we've said that district assessment coordinators would not have to report as allegations. But what we have experienced is that those DACs actually do report all of those things anyway. And then in addition to that, we think there are at least a couple of them that actually should be reported as allegations. So particularly the bottom one there, students with accommodations but were not provided accommodations, that really should be an allegation. So we'd like to delete those and then make it clear through language that really all inappropriate testing practices should be reported as allegations. And then on the next slide is the last change that we're proposing, and that is to eliminate the testing board of review in the allegation process. So it's the 3rd step. So step 1 is someone reports the testing inappropriate practice. Then step 2 is that the testing allegation coordinator investigates that and comes up with a determination and a recommendation for what should happen, usually extra training or something like that. And then the 3rd step has been that those recommendations go before a testing board of review, which is just a small group of KDE employees that review those recommendations, and then they will make their recommendations to the commissioner. But what we've heard is that this 3rd step here actually bottlenecks the process, and it causes a real delay in when people who have an allegation against them find out what their determination is. And then we were also told that it really has made no difference in the outcome, that the testing board of review has hardly ever had a different opinion than what the testing allegation coordinator had. And then when the few times that they have, it has just been, that wouldn't change the outcome, just insignificant kind of disagreement or difference of opinion, I guess. So those are the recommended changes that we have. Again, Rhonda said Beth's on there if you have questions about the allegation process, or we're happy to answer any questions about the rest of that.
Any discussion?
I will do one clarification. This would not go in effect this year, obviously. So, we're working toward, it would be the next school year before we would have training, and this would go through the full reg process, because it still will be out for public comment, all those steps. So it's not impacting the 24-25 school year. It'd be the 25-26 school year, just to be clear about that.
So like through training, those test items, the testing tickets and seal codes, they're already treating those as secure materials, but
That's
we just want to
right.
make it
Just
official.
Make it clear.
Yeah.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the proposed amendment to 703 KAR 5080 Administration Code for Kentucky's Educational Assessment Program?
Make that motion.
We have a motion on the floor. I need a second, please.
Second.
Have a second. Now we'll do a roll call vote.
Brian Alexander,
Yes.
Kirk Biggerstaff,
Yes.
Harry Burchett,
Yes.
Tom Cochran,
Yes.
David Cox,
Yes.
Will Hodges,
Yes.
Sheila Mitchell,
Yes.
Karen Solis, Russ Tilford,
Yes.
Henry Webb.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Do you have another item too?
We do. We have another item. The next regulation that we're bringing forward is administrative procedures and guidelines. This ends in 240. And then you're going to have a companion piece in a moment with our Office of Education Technology. Again, it's sort of about updating where we are with how tests are administered. So this regulation, and Meredith, you'll go to the next slide, it really is where we get the rules around a student needs to be with you 100 days to be in your accountability because you have tested students that maybe have been there 10 days, but accountability is based on that 100-day classification of full academic year. And it also is things like, are there some students who shouldn't take the test? Where do their accountability, does it code to the school? Does it code to the district? Does it code to the state? So all those rules are in this particular regulation. What we found is that now that we have more experiences with students who are enrolled full-time in online virtual programs, we don't really have language in this regulation to acknowledge that. The reg was obviously built at a time when school was about being inside four walls and, you know, being in a room and not being in a virtual space. And so we needed to add some language to this particular reg so that we can account and include appropriately in accountability students who are in those full-time enrolled online virtual programs. And so the companion piece will be with our Office of Education and Technology in a few moments to go along with this, but we'll kind of highlight for you where the changes are in this regulation.
So on the next slide, we start with in section 1, making a change to what we have termed as the A1 school. So we have a dozen or so instances in the regulation where we reference A1 schools, which is just the schools where most students go. But we also have a B1 school, the model lab, that is also an accountable school. So we would like to delete A1 and replace it with the term accountable school. And so that also gives us flexibility if other school classifications are added later that could be accountable. And then also in section 1, we are introducing the full-time enrolled online virtual and remote learning program into the definitions because we're going to reference it later in the regulation. And so on the next slide, you'll see where we do that in section 4, and this is where most of the language is added. So these are things we are already doing for our alternative programs where we are including them in reporting. That reporting is separate from accountable school reporting, and then just that we list the unique features. And then in section 5, we also needed to add these virtual programs as we explain how we report them into 1, 2, or 3 grade level configurations. So for example, if the school is a K through 5, it will be reported as an elementary. A K through 8 school will be reported at its elementary level and middle level, and the K through 12 at all 3 levels would have its own report. So just to account for those virtual programs we don't have in there currently to show how they'll be reported. And then for accountability, we're actually addressing that by including that in the department's regulation for the full-time enrolled online virtual and remote learning programs, and that's 704 KAR 3535. So those are the suggestions, the changes we're recommending today.
So just a few tweaks in the accountability reg to move to that concept of accountable school rather than using the term A1, since we now have some B1s with model lab, it's in statutory. But then as you talk with Marty Park here in a moment, you're going to see then how it connects to this next regulation that is in the Office of Education Technology.
Questions, discussion? Dr. Webb?
Thank you. Just a question about reporting scores for students enrolled virtually full-time or in alternative education programs. There are districts that we do some of this, but there are districts across the state that when you enroll kids full-time, they may or may not be in there for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, but they're full-time while they're there. So when I see reporting, so how many days do I have to be in that program? So for example, in our district, if you are in a virtual learning program full-time, if we monitor your progress, and if you're not making significant progress, we put interventions in place. And then if you're still not making success, we have a meeting with the parents and ask you to come back to school.
I got you.
Because we don't want you to fail, sit at home and fail, right?
Right.
So if a kid's in our virtual learning program for 12 weeks, and then they come back and enroll in school, will their school be reported in the virtual learning program? Same thing with alternate education setting. How long do I have to be in there full-time?
Right. And Jenny, you feel free to chime in here. I think the base is for reporting just assessment results, it depends on where did they take the test. So if they were still enrolled in the online program at the time the testing was administered. They'll show up in the assessment reporting that's just based on who you tested. If they had matriculated back to the regular school, they'll show up there if they've done 100 days, will be whether they're in accountability. But if you're testing them at the regular school, they would show up in the assessment results for the regular school. I'm pretty sure that, I think that's the way it's structured right now. Jenny, you correct me if I said something wrong there.
I think you may have more to say.
A
or
different
I'm confused now.
Yeah.
Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but an alternative education program,
Right.
scores go back to the homeschool anyway.
They do. They go back to the
Yeah, so
homeschool.
you just mentioned 100 days if they're in that program.
Well, that's if they're back in the regular school. You, in your scenario, you talked about them coming back to regular school. So that's why I added that reference, and I probably confused it by doing that.
But correct me, it doesn't matter if I have a kid enrolled.
Because they're gonna
in
call
Simon
back to
Kenton
you
High
anyway.
School And they go to our alternative
That's right.
program, they're enrolled in Simon Kenton High
That's
School
exactly right.
regardless. So the
That's
100
right.
days really doesn't matter. They're going to
That's
get
right.
those scores.
That's right. They're going to track back. And you find that with some of the online programs, you may, a couple districts go together and do a program, maybe out of a co-op. Then it's
Scores
going to
go
go back. Those kids are your kids and you've stayed connected to them. The score's going to come back to you. So this tracking back, exactly what you're talking about, Superintendent Webb,
But
does
what I hear
occur.
you saying, Rhonda, is it really doesn't matter how long you're in the program. It's where you are the day that test is given.
In terms of the assessment results.
Just reported.
Just reporting the
Whether or not it's
assessment
gonna be reported in
results.
alternate
That's
education
exactly right. It's where you're enrolled at the time you take the test. It's where assessment results go. Accountability, you start calculating in, do you go back to an A1 school and has it been 100 days? So you kind of separate those out.
Any further discussion? Do I have a motion to approve the proposed amendment to 703 KAR 5240 Accountability Administrative Procedures and Guidelines?
I'll move.
Got a motion, I need a second.
Second.
And we have a second, let's do roll call vote.
Brian Alexander,
Yes.
Kirk Biggerstaff,
Yes.
Harry Burchett,
Yes.
Tom Cochran,
Yes.
David Cox,
Yes.
Will Hodges,
Yes.
Sheila Mitchell,
Yes.
Karen Solis, Russ Tilford,
Yes.
Henry Webb.
Yes.
Thank you. The final regulation on today's agenda concerns online, virtual, and remote learning programs. To present this item, we have representatives from the Office of Educational Technology, the Office of Teaching and Learning, the Office of Legal Services, and the Office of Assessment and Accountability. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Marty Park. Glad to be with you. We had the opportunity 2 years ago to present as we established this administrative regulation after a 2-year period of a waiver process in order to have another option, an additional option for our online virtual remote learning students. So we found, obviously through pandemic, that we had a small percentage of students who excelled in an online virtual experience. And so we added another option per superintendent request. And so the theme for the day is cleanup, and that's what this is as well. And so after a year of implementation of 704 KAR 3:535, we're working through additional cleanup, and Associate Commissioner Sims shared that this is really companion work to the regulation that you just heard. In this administrative regulation amendment, there's one new thing, there's one clarification, and then there's one emphasis. And so there's not much change really to it. The one new thing is adding the primary enrollment in an accountable school. And that cleans up our accountability work, which was just shared. The one clarification that you'll find in section 6C is that teachers must be employed by the school district. That was a question that we had received throughout year one of the implementation, and so we wanted to clarify that. And then the one emphasis that we've made, which has already been addressed in our digital learning guidelines, it's in superintendent assurances that you all see every year, but it emphasizes that each local board shall adopt and annually review policies and procedures for the operation of the program. That includes procedures for regular periodic monitoring, which you just shared. That's what we're doing in our programs already across the state. If a student is having trouble and not being successful in progressing, then we have a backup. We change the plan and we move them back to an in-person traditional format. There are other minor technical modifications that we've highlighted. An example is in section 10. That's the section that states that if the enrollment is through performance-based courses, like a course designed for performance-based, then they're not covered in this administrative regulation. That was already in the regulation. We just moved it to a section on its own so that it would stand out. And so we're excited to move these clarifications and amendments forward to clean up. So if there are any questions.
I have a question with regards to the hiring of the certified staff member, that new additional language. How would that affect a situation where districts are working together through, say, a co-op program or something like that?
I think that we have some really good models across the state that are addressing that today, and it's working towards Kentucky certified teachers. And I think it's calling it out, clarification. I don't know if Todd, if you want to speak to that, but
so I mean, I'm understanding then that as long as the teacher is a certified teacher through the standards board, they wouldn't have to be employed by the district of the student where they're enrolled, because the student could be receiving services through the co-op, but they're still enrolled in the local district.
Absolutely. Because of the
does that make
primary enrollment.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the clarification or the kind of the new language on primary enrollment. Yep.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Do I have a motion to approve the proposed amendment to 704 KAR 3535 full-time enrolled online, virtual, and remote learning programs? We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Let's do a roll call vote.
Brian Alexander,
Yes.
Biggerstaff,
Yes.
Harry Burchett,
Yes.
Tom Cochran,
Yes.
David Cox,
Yes.
Will Hodges,
Yes.
Sheila Mitchell,
Yes.
Karen Solis, Russ Tilford,
Yes.
Henry Webb.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
To conclude our meeting, Rhonda Sims and Jennifer Stafford from the Office of Assessment and Accountability have requested our feedback on the Reimagining Assessment and Accountability Prototype Version 2.0 document.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, before we get started here.
Sure.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I want to thank Team KDE. There was a lot of work that was done to prepare for today's meeting. There's so many meetings behind the meeting, that's accomplished. And there's a lot of teamwork that goes on to get these regulations cleaned up, if you will. And so I just want to take the opportunity to thank Team KDE for your work today. But also, too, thank our superintendents for the questions. We want to hear those. We want to see where those lead us. It gives us an opportunity to review our work, so thank you for that. With that same type of idea, moving into our prototypes, we want to hear your input. So this is valuable time, and thankfully we've gone through, we still have a lot of time here. We want to hear your input on the prototypes. You've had opportunities to look at those. And today is going to be more about a high-level discussion of, you've seen the prototypes. We don't feel like we really need to get into the details of the prototypes. But on the other hand, we're going to show you the data that we're seeing so that you can say, okay, this is exactly what KDE is seeing. This is what the Cool Council is seeing. And then you could see, okay, what do we agree with, what we disagree with? Have we thought of this? So again, we want to show you that data so you can see what we're seeing. Okay. I'll turn it over to, thank you,
Sure.
Chairman, for allowing me that time.
I think the one term I would use here is trending. You know, we've just gotten feedback. We literally had Cool Council yesterday, so we've kind of very quickly pulled forward some things. But we want to kind of show you kind of what is trending forward on those decision points, things that are yet to be decided. And, you know, we obviously have a lot of left in the process here, but Jennifer's led this work exceptionally well out of our office, and it's been a big team effort here at KDE. And so I know most of you have had an opportunity to hear her on the superintendent webcast or recording, or even on the link we put out. So again, we're going to kind of highlight a few things, but kind of let you see what we're seeing as trending kinds of things, and let you see where there is real sort of disagreement. As you would expect, there's disagreement. But there are things that are kind of trending all in sort of one direction. So let's kind of walk
Sending
through
a
this.
thank you to the legislators and the board members.
That was an accident, I think.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for allowing us time. And we're really looking forward to your feedback today. And I want to thank you for also completing the survey, because your voices are within the data that we are sharing this morning. So thank you to our superintendents who completed it. Thank you to our district assessment coordinators who completed the survey. So the development of the prototypes is an iterative process. We started with 1.0. Version 1.0 was for our menu of options work group, and they had given some direction. And we thought, as facilitators, we thought we captured that direction that they gave, and we presented it to them, and they said we didn't get it quite right. So prototype 1.0, which had 4 prototypes, then was changed and updated to 2.0, which you saw 2 prototypes. So it's an evolving document. We are going through this. So there are choice points within the different prototypes. The prototypes are not set in stone. It's not prototype 1 versus prototype 2. It is, what do you like within prototype 1? What do you like within prototype 2? It gives us some discussion points, some places to start to think about what we like and then what we don't like as well. So we had shared the prototype version 2.0 and asked for feedback. So district assessment coordinators and superintendents responded to the survey that went out. And this is the data that you're seeing today. It was just from those 2 groups, as well as our school curriculum assessment and accountability work council. They also had the opportunity to weigh in, and if they so chose to complete the survey, they did. So we have just 1 or 2 responses from our SCAC members. So, but for the majority, it is our district assessment coordinators and superintendents. So within the prototype 1, we had the choice point around individual student growth or change. And so in our current statute, we have change, which is the differences in school performance on status on those indicators from one year to the next. So we ask and put forth a choice point. Do you want to continue with change or go with an individual student growth? And as you can see here from the slide, you can see that of the respondents, 60 out of the 74 that responded to the survey would rather go with the individual student growth. So that is a direction that's trending right now, and that is the place where we have the most consensus. In agreement about. So we're thinking that that is a direction that we will continue in the next version 3.0 that will go to the Board of Education.
Dr. Stafford, could we stop? Any comments from superintendents about that trend?
Thank you.
Anything that you see there that you want to make a comment about as we go through? It seems to be, when you talk to people, it's more about where did you get the child and where did you take them. So this trend seems to be more about individual student growth as opposed to looking at cohort from the 3rd grade this year versus 3rd grade last year. So again, the trend seems to be along those lines of where did you get the child and where did you take them. Now that then kind of narrows the discussion after that into some more decision points. So if we're leaning this way, this is where we're trending. And again, we need that input to see how people agree. And this is probably one of the biggest areas of we agree on this. I think you can see the data there for yourself. So again, just if there's any input there. Okay. Next slide.
All right, great. Then we get into the assessment options. So the assessment options, as a reminder, assessment option 1.2A was the through year model, in that the state would produce and offer multiple assessments throughout the year to replace the local districts interim or benchmark assessments that they're currently purchasing, such as MAP and iReady and others. The approach here would be that the through course model would be a comprehensive, cohesive system that would align to a small summative assessment at the end. And this is for reading and math that would capture that student learning, that would give students, teachers, and parents input on a regular basis so that the teachers could utilize the information around those benchmark assessments for instructional purposes. Now, we're thinking that the state would continue science, social studies, and writing in the same way within that option. You can see here, then the next option, 1.2b, is the competency-based, and it is bringing together and reading, math, and science, a combination of short-form standardized assessments and some authentic performance tasks. So these performance tasks would be like sophisticated opportunities for students to demonstrate their thinking and their understanding of the concepts being taught. That would also be aligned to those portraits of a learner. So the next option, the 1.2c, would reduce the federal to the assessments that the state would administer to what's federally required to reading, math, and science. So shifting the social studies and writing to a local assessment and for local instructional purposes. So you can see here that there's not as much agreement that as we had in the individual student growth and change. You can see that as far as the district assessment coordinators and superintendents, that the through year model trailed by the competency based by a few, and that there was some support of reducing the assessments to just the federal required content areas. So let me pause there and see if you would like Dr. Fletcher, and see if there's any comments around the assessments.
Oh, absolutely. And you could see, I think if we go back to that first trend of going through a change, going to student growth as opposed to change, that could have some impact here. Mm-hmm. So, as we trend one way or the other, it's going to have other impacts. Now, I think that leaves both versions or all three versions open. So you're looking at the first one. If we could go back, Jennifer, if you wouldn't mind, please. I'm sorry, whoever's. You look at the very first item there with 1.2a. Again, that's should be in your packets or online. You're looking a lot about a single summative assessment in reading and mathematics that replaces the statewide. So how does that look? What are your thoughts about that? Versus the second one is more of a competency-based approach. And I really like what they've talked about, the strengths of each and also challenges. For example, a strength of a competency-based approach, it's going to be piloting supports quality. If we went this route, what's the capacity of districts to be ready for this? Then how much piloting time will we have to do? So again, if you have that piloting time, that allows you more time for buy-in. But then on the other hand too, it's a big change. This is a big change. So how will districts have capacity to do this? Whereas the third one, one of the challenges I see on the third one, some people may see that as we're trying to diminish the importance of social studies and writing, and I don't see it that way at all. It's just the opposite to me on the third one. So there's strengths and weaknesses of both, or I'm sorry, I shouldn't say weaknesses, I should say challenges for each one, and we need that input from you, because you can see this is where we are. When we look into 3.0, which we're hoping to have later on in the week, and take it onto the board for 4.0, then we're going to send it out to districts to say, okay, study phase. We don't expect you to implement a testing model or an accountability model. We want you to present it to your people within your district and say, okay, these are the pitfalls we see. This is what we like. These are things, if this was implemented, this would be the struggle we would have. But we really feel like this may be the best way to go. So this is your opportunity to have some input too. And I know many of you have already filled out the survey, but any thoughts on this portion? And listen, there's some passion in the room and yesterday. Henry.
Well, I mean, I've been doing this a minute, seen a lot of different assessments. So I'm a big fan of the growth versus change. I really don't appreciate the change at all. But in our office, our team met and submitted feedback. While I think the competency-based sounds in theory excellent, the implementation of that, we believe, is going to be extremely difficult for most districts. I remember the old writing portfolios where we had to train people to make sure everybody's calibrated, and then you had to do monitoring visits to make sure that people were doing it. I mean, I believe personally, our team believes competency-based is excellent, but it should be left at the local level. Because I've visited a lot of districts that do competency-based, and there's a lot of varying opinions on what's competency-based and what's high quality and what's not. So to me, that one is, in theory, the best, but a nightmare to try to implement. So good luck with that if we go down that road. That'll probably be after I'm gone. But what I would say is, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm more based, I would tell you, doing a local accountability model, we have more data on our kids than ever before, and nobody's making us do that. It's transparent. You can get online and see it. So we're of the opinion of the growth and the math and reading, and let districts have local accountability and be responsible for reporting that in some fashion to the state and to the local community on their successes. And you're accountable, but you're not accountable to the level where everybody's got to do it the exact same way. So I just wanted to share, because I know competency-based is going to get a lot of discussion. I know it's going to get a lot of people interested, but the implementation of that really concerns us.
Thank you for that.
I appreciate the work that you all are doing with this. I know that can be challenging and exhausting at times, I'm sure. That's the way feedback goes sometimes. But in looking at the different prototypes, one of the questions that ran through my head was, okay, so we're proposing some new ways of doing things when it comes to accountability, but we're still going to have all of the federal, state required tests to still do that. Is that correct?
Well, that depends on the route that we go. You still have federal requirements that, and going to Dr. Webb's point, there has to be comparability across, and how do you do that with competency-based? So that would have to be, we'd have to actually look at addressing with the federal requirements and maybe taking it to the federal government and say, okay, how can we approve this? So I say all that to say is, the idea that we're trying to push towards is we don't want to add tests. We don't want to add things to your districts, because we all have universal screeners. We all have that progress monitoring tool. Why can't something like that be part of the accountability system so that we don't add tests? So we're not trying to push extra in. What we're trying to do is what makes sense, but also too, how do we ensure that every single child has those vibrant learning opportunities? Everything from defenses of learning to capstone projects to other types of internships, dual credit. And then two, locally, you may define that on your own in some way. What is a vibrant learning opportunity in Kenton County versus Harrison versus Pikeville versus Anderson? So there's some opportunities there. But again, we're not trying to add to, but we're also, how do we adhere to the federal requirements?
Right.
And also, how do we approach the state government, which I will say we had 4 or 5 legislators. We had one online and 4 others that were a part of the work yesterday. So very thankful for that.
And that was just a concern. I think that we all would be concerned in adding additional accountability pieces when, there's pressure there as it is.
Well, and not trying to say that, like, for example, the competency base is a heavy lift. It's a heavy lift. It really is. But on the other hand, too, what type of accountability system can we implement that really changes the student's experience? And some of us are already doing these things across our state, but how do we give everybody that opportunity? And I'll use Lawrence County as an example. We just finished, before I became commissioner, we had finished our work as far as a portrait of the learner. We had done our performance level descriptors, and we're looking at, well, now what does an accountability system locally look like to measure those performance level descriptors, and how do we show growth? So there's a lot of great work going across, and then some people are farther along than others. So that being said, not to add in something new, but make sure that we also, if we're going to challenge federal requirements, we need to make sure we have a clear plan before we go that far. And that's what this is about.
Looking at the numbers, and I've heard you speak to the point of we're asking for your input. If you don't provide input, don't complain later on. I think there, unless I'm wrong, I believe there's still 171 school districts in Kentucky. So that, if you ask superintendents and assessment coordinators, that should be, potential for 342 responses. And we've got about 20%, maybe 21% response rate on this right now. And that's not good enough. I think everybody would be disappointed with those results. But I'm like Henry, I think for a long time we've tried to, I think we felt like we had to make our state system fit into the federal regulations and guidance. I think we've always tried to make what we're doing in Kentucky comply and fit. We know that they've got a big purse, and they tell us how, what we've got to do with regards to that. So, but I, as well, am in the mindset of more like the 1.2C, because we all already have tools and instruments that can gather an assessment of a student as they walk in the door, as they come to us, and we can measure that throughout the year, ongoing. And if you would see that as maybe a buffet of local resources to do that are approved, whether that's MAP or iReady or whatever product, a district's using, as long as it was on a state approved list, if we could gather that data from that, I think that would work. And then, local measures of accountability. I mean, the work that Henry's doing and Creasman, Dr. Creasman and Fleming and many other places are doing great work in that area. It really gives us the ability to really focus on the individual learning of every student and the individual growth of every student, not just as learners, but as leaders, as communicators, as, all those characteristics of a portrait of a learner that we're striving for, and the workforce partners are asking for us to produce. We can really focus in on that and still meet federal requirements. So that's my mindset: reduction and in state assessments, use what tools we have, and meet the federal requirements, and demonstrate to the public that yes, we are meeting our charge in education, but also, hey, look at all this great local work that's going on with these students and where they are and how they're prepared for life, because that's what we're charged with. When they walk across that stage, are they ready to go out and compete in life in all aspects? So thank you for the work that's going on.
I appreciate that. And two, one of the things that we've tried to emphasize is we want that input. So when 4.0 comes out for another round of input, that's something that all of our districts need to have. That we want 100% of our districts having input, whether it be through their DAC or through their superintendent, or just as a team. We want that input. So to have 73, 75 in that area, we would love to have that number at a larger rate. But we have to have a very clear picture. If we're going to challenge aspects of the federal requirements, we need to have a very clear picture moving forward. But if we're going to keep within the federal requirements, then our step is, how do we approach our state government? And we're having them as part of the discussion, I think, is a big part of that partnership. So good points. Bless you. Other comments about these three?
I'm not officially here until Thursday, I think, is when I become on this committee, but I'll share an opinion. I think it's so nice that our conversation is around the growth of an individual kid. Because we all know that's never been what we've been allowed to measure, and usually it's been because of federal requirements. But that's why we go to work every day, is to see where we reach a kid from the moment we get them until the moment they walk across our stage, or the moment we lose them to another state or district or whatever. how do we help impact them? That's ultimately what we do. And so I think it's so nice, and thank you to everyone who's involved, who's willing to have the conversation to say, let's go to the federal government and talk to them about, back to what Dr. Birch's point, what we believe is right for our kids, because that is. And I think there's a challenge with through course, because if you pick a kid up in the fall and measure them to the spring, it's really easy to say, well, hey, they had some learning loss and they started off a little slow, and of course they grew. I mean, if they don't, we understand, we see that in our map. But I think maybe if we measure the kid for a long period of time, it's not just from the fall to the spring, but that kid in the previous grade and as they move forward. I really love, and I know there's a lot of challenges to that, including, what version some of us use MAP, some of us use, a STAR in certain areas and iReady. And I've said to him before, nobody asked me if we wanted to use Brenda's Hall, we just did it. And so, there may be a system where we decide as a state that we're all going to use the same measures for that particular piece of accountability, or maybe that there's something that we can measure the standards. But I just think it's great that we're really talking about the individual kid, because every single individual kid deserves that attention and deserves that information to help us to build throughout the year. So we're not just I mean, this is the earliest we've ever gotten our assessments, but we're going to already be teaching our kids. And so it's just really nice that this kind of work is taking place, and this is our conversation. It's about individual kids and letting local districts take that charge. I think that's a however we end up, whether it's the first model. I like the through year. I just think it's something we're very comfortable with. I worry a little bit about the performance based. I used to be an ATC principal, and there's some ATC folks back there, and I remember the box that we used to do, and I can tell you the box was as big a distraction as the 2 weeks of state testing, because there were some people that worked on it all year, sometimes when they should have been teaching. And there were some people who taught all year and killed themselves and worked on the box for 2 weeks and stopped teaching. And usually that was the best box. But it wasn't. And when you came in and you graded it, the folks that graded it would say, hey, this is a great program. No, that's not a great program. It's a really good box put together, And so I think we need to be really cautious if we go performance-based, that it's a product that truly represents what's taking place. It's why I like the through course a little bit better, just because I think sometimes it can appear vibrant because people are really creative and cute. And vibrant truly is great learning for our kids. So.
Well, just to add to what Superintendent Trimble is talking about, if we look at a through course assessment, and if we could develop our own, or we could look at putting on RFP to vendors, say this is what we're looking for. It has to be measure Kentucky standards, but also too, it has to be, if we're looking at federal guidelines, it has to be comparable. So do we look at grade level equivalency? Do we look, what are some things that we look at as far as, if we go a vendor route, do we pick one vendor as a state, or do we look at, would it be possible to have 2 or 3 vendors to choose from, but how would it be comparable? So that's the hard part. That's the obstacle. How do you make sure you're having different vendors and making sure that data is comparable? Because at the end of the day, one of the boxes that we have to check is we have to be able to identify CSI schools. And as much as I hate to say that, we still have to be able to identify that from federal regulations. So I like the through course assessment, but every one of these have obstacles. But again, just pointing through that, I would like to have a model that impacts a child's desk the next day. You assess today, maybe 2 or 3 days, but by the end of the week, you have something that impacts the student's desk, or the student's learning environment, I should say, the next day.
Sorry, but what he's talking about with growth, most districts are doing that today.
Mm-hmm.
So the data we're sitting here talking about, you can go to most districts in Kentucky can get, and I'm gonna be honest, that's what we value. We can tell you individual kids in our school district, how far they've come the entire year. We'll be able to do that here very soon. So that's what we're working on anyway. So it'd be great if we had an accountability model that was congruent with the work that's going on in Kentucky. The other thing that I would say, Commissioner Fletcher, and you mentioned it, I've seen in my career accountability models change because groups organize because they feel like their content is not being valued. We don't have to I hope we can change the mindset that if we don't test it, it doesn't matter. We've got to get out of that mindset in the state, because I promise you, every educator I've ever met cares. 99.9% of them are working their tail off to try to grow kids. We don't have to have a score to say that you're valued. So I hope we can change that mindset. Not everything has to be measured. And you all know, we could go around the room, you could tell me things that were added because this group organized. So I hope that we keep that in the back of our mind as we really, because I love this conversation. Thank you all.
And again, that's what we alluded to a little earlier. Just because it may not be, we can, as a local group, as a local school district, this is what our people value. We can put that measure out there and let people see it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be calculated into a number. It doesn't have to be, but it's yet how Anderson County views a certain topic or certain values or certain their portrait of the learner or even a subject matter may be a little bit differently than what you're going to see over in Cumberland County, in other areas. So with that being said, I think it's very important that we understand the value of the local accountability of what we value, and then have the opportunities that displaying that data, because we want our community to see it, let them know we're listening to them. But I think it may be up to us to say we value this individually as a district and let our people see that, as opposed to just because it's not on a state number doesn't mean we don't value it. Yes. But again, it's about communicating with our people. It's about communicating.
How difficult is it, though, to work with the federal government in terms of getting, I guess, some kind of waiver or, getting it congruent, I guess? Because I think I think that's an important piece to this discussion as well.
Yeah. They are not the most flexible folks that we've ever worked with. It is a negotiation process when we take forward a consolidated state plan that has more than just the assessment system in it. It has all the title programs, and there is a bit of a negotiation process. Typically, you see the sort of an expectation for comparability, the sort of all students taking a similar test, the same test for particular purposes, for like the designation of CSI and TSI. We've really not seen any waiver off of that at this point. The U.S. Department of Ed signals they're interested in innovation, and there are different groups within the Department of Education. So there's a group that's really promoting innovation. There's also a group that measures your consolidated plan and says it meets federal law, check, 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 or come back to you when it doesn't meet. And, we've had a number of things we've had to shift over the years, and we've come to you because they would be changes in regulations. We used to have something called an extraordinary circumstance exemption. So some kid experiences a really traumatic sort of event. It's very unusual. You can't get them tested. We had an exemption in place that for years. We were told in an audit process, you can't exempt a child with that. It has to only be medically oriented. Now, medical can be physical, emotional, and other. So the level of detail of how you're meeting the federal law is what they're checking for when your consolidated plan comes through. But, and you do negotiate back and forth, and when we go forward with accountability cut scores and accountability systems, it is a negotiation process. So it's not, I'd say there's space for discussion. It's not sort of like wide open that anything you want to do, they're going to say yes to. At least we've not seen that in our experience of interacting and what we hear from other states, because these are common conversations across people in our roles in other states as well.
And there's a little thing called an election that's going to happen in November.
That's exactly right. And that changes. It doesn't change the law, but it may change the focus on how you interpret various things with the law. To change the law requires a reauthorization of the Elementary Education Act. And we're not hearing that's on the table at all, as you're not surprised by that.
Are we ready for the next set of slides? Any other comments?
I'll make a couple comments just because I'm really excited about Friday. So once we get our data, I think that might change some of outcomes of what people really think about even any of these prototypes. That's my opinion. But looking at prototype 1, my question is, and I'm very driven on formative assessments, and I believe that with the formative assessment, the way I'm interpreting this, it could potentially look like formative assessments, whether that look like a state formative assessment versus a local formative assessment, and how that impacts the overall summative, the end result, the May, if you will, assessment. So my question, would be around first, if we do go with local assessment, whether it be MAP or iReady, is that something that the state would pay for? I know you all probably haven't even got into talking about that yet, but that would be a question that I think superintendents would want to know the answer to, because we're all invested in what we already do. Sure. Outside of that, I think if it's not, and it would be a vendor where it's an RFP and it goes out and we look at a state assessment that gives us formative data, I think that will be great. But I think what's fair, I'm speaking as a teacher who I date back like Henry to 1995, 1994, and I remember being a teacher that was very driven on state standards, and I understood what was expected of me and how to get children to score proficient distinguished on the state exam. Being able to do that, knowing that if I'm going to be expected to test my students 3 and 4 times a year, I would want to know what those points are within that curriculum map and what is expected of them, so that I could reach those points each time those exams or those state assessments, whether it be online, whether it be written, would be able to reach. And I think that would be important for that growth piece for students. I think the legislators have spoken very clearly from our last couple of years that, and we've experienced growth versus change. We understand the difference between growth and change. I think we all agree as administrators we would prefer growth, because that's what's good for children. We watch them grow from August to May, and that's what our hope is that we're able to master standards by the end of the school year, and we build on that for the next school year. And just like some of my colleagues have mentioned, we value that, and we're very committed to making sure that our teachers value that for the purpose of teaching our children the next grade level even, and transitioning that data from one grade level to the next. Outside of that, I think something that we have to remember for teachers is, and I'm going to circle back to what I said in the beginning, the curriculum that is expected, that standards with that alignment, is so important to helping the teachers prepare the students for those points, those formative assessments, if that's how we're looking at this. That's how I would look at it, to reach the end goal. And I think curriculum is the key to helping us move the needle forward for standards. My question around prototype, I can't see which one it is, but I think it's 1.2C with reading, math, and science. My concern, and I've shared my concerns several times around science and what that looks like for the state. Reading and math, I feel like we are pretty solid on that across the state. Everyone's worked hard. We understand that. And I feel like we still have some work to do in science to be able to get our students to those proficient distinguished levels as they compare to other assessments such as AP, such as ACT, such as PSAT, such as dual credit, and all the things that children are prepared for. So my wonder would be, and I would be all for even merging those two prototypes together to be able to say that, if we're going to use that formative assessment for reading, math, I think science would be a great opportunity to also add that into that prototype. We already have the civics assessment by statute for social studies. I think everybody's committed to that. We understand what those expectations are. We've now been given 2 additional opportunities to pick for that, which is great. And I think that probably would make a lot of superintendents and maybe even DACs and social studies teachers happy. My last comment is, how open is the legislator to the difference in transitioning from change back to growth? Because equally as important that you brought up about the federal system and how challenging that can be to get that waiver in place to do whatever model it is that we're getting feedback on through these prototypes. our General Assembly is going to make the final decision on what state assessment's going to look like. So the question remains, how open are they to change versus growth before we put a lot of additional time, energy, and concern and worry into changing the model? Because, you know, you and I both served on that model, and we worked very hard to come up with a model that was as good as it could be with the requirements that we were expected to adhere to. We all know that. And we still have some concerns around that. However, I also agree with the comment of how many models are we going to go through before we find a model that we're going to stick with, for lack of a better way of saying it, so that we can get some consistency and we can get some, so that we don't continue to make so many changes for our students, our staff, and so that we can get really proficient at implementing a model.
That's right.
Again, as Henry said, he's been doing this a long time, so have I. And I, you know, as a teacher, as a DAC, as a curriculum instructor, as assistant superintendent, now superintendent, I've gone through a lot of models. I've seen a lot of good things happen in Kentucky. I go back to when I was a teacher and we did it really well. I got a lot of feedback and reports that helped me guide my teaching for my students the next year. And I know that that's something we've talked about before. That would be valuable for teachers, DACs, principals, to be able to take that, analyze what we do really well, and be able to help coach our teachers so that we can help better prepare our children. My last comment, sir.
I'll make a few comments. First of all, one of the goals here is to have consistency over time. You know, I've been in this for, I think this is starting year 29. And I can't tell you how many different accountability systems that we've been through. As a matter of fact, even as a student, I can remember performance events. So if you guys are wondering, I do turn 50 in the near future. So very near future.
100.
But
Half a hundred.
half a hundred. And maybe that many different accountability systems, half a hundred, maybe. Or at least different iterations. So our goal here is, and the reason why that looking back at what the department and others have gone through is this hasn't just happened overnight. We're trying to get buy-in. We're trying to have conversations. So there's a system that we, first of all, serves the needs of our children. We want an accountability system that serves the needs of our children and also serves the needs of our community. So if we get that buy-in, then we're able to, okay, this is what we want to do. Now, I'm not saying that after 3 or 4 years, there's not a tweak, you know, but I don't think we should overhaul. That's why we want that buy-in and take this long process to get as much information as possible, not from all stakeholders. But the second thing I'll say is, as far as buy-in from our legislators, it is so refreshing to have our legislators at the table with us. And that increase, we thought we were just going to have 1, then we're up to 4. Now we have 5, and I think now we have 5 ambassadors that are going out and talk to other legislators. So, but we want their input too. So even before we go to them with something, we want to say, okay, is this something we all believe in, including legislators? So having them part of the development process is so important. Now, you'll never know at the end of the day, they still have to cast a vote, yes or no. But we're hoping that when we go to them, they feel like they've been a part of the process. When we go talk to the interim joint committees on education with I think we'll be looking at probably late in the fall. I think we're looking at talking to them. They're part of the process. Representative Bojanowski, it was great to listen to her talk about it. And then also Tipton and also Wise, Senator Wise were all at the table. I think Senator Neal was actually watching online because he didn't feel as well. Senator Deneen was part of that conversation, but expanding that out to let legislators know we want their input now so that they're comfortable with what we bring to them. Now, it's not going to be that simple. There's going to be a lot of work that has to happen, but to have them at the table is so refreshing, and we appreciate that. So how's that final vote? We'll see, but we want to make sure they're part of the process because we want them to say they're voting for their work also.
Dr. Fletcher, this is I started to say Robbie, but I corrected myself. This is Dave Cox in court, and I'm with my DAC. This is a great conversation, and I appreciate the fact that we're even having this discussion. And I've been around as you have for a bit now, going on 33 years. And so I was here when they started CATS, and we've progressed through there. I would just hope that we would remember that we're assessing students. And I learned early on when I was in the classroom, just as most of you did, if not all, that when I varied the assessment is when I got my best results. No matter what we do, if we're not getting accurate results, the assessment system is worthless. And so I think the through course assessments, the implementation performance events, whatever terminology you want to use, the road that you're on is good. And giving us some opportunity to participate in that is really good. We've had some sidebar conversations, my DAC and I, off microphone, and it seems to me that if you want to get the best information from the kids, that actually actionable information, then we need to remember who it is that we're assessing. And these are students, and to get the best information, we need to find a way. It needs to be differentiated, is what I'm trying to say. And I hope that they would remember that during this whole process. And so I think that's probably what we should be really searching for, is that the best information that we can get, as opposed to checking boxes. So that's just, I guess, my input, and I do appreciate, appreciate the effort everybody's put in. So thank you for that.
So I know we're getting close to time here, but let's go through another slide. And if we need to, we'll send out a survey possibly to everyone just for LSAC, and that way you can have some more input. But let's do one more slide, if you don't mind, as it pleases the chairman.
Sure.
We'll do one more slide and possibly put together a survey to finish out, if that's okay.
Sounds great.
All right, thanks, sir.
Okay, so then let's move then, if we're doing one more piece, let's move to the vibrant learning experiences. So the options here are within the second prototype, leads us to vibrant learning experiences within the federal system or within the state system. So what we've been talking about this morning is consistency within the federal programs. So with that, this vibrant learning experience would bring the opportunity for schools to have choices within a menu of options, and the students would be able to have input and voice in the choices that they how they are assessed, whether it's capstone project, defenses of learning, those things of that nature, and then trying to also bring about a process where if a school or district had their own type of vibrant learning experience assessment, that they could bring that in. So those could be different across schools using the same rubric, though. That would be where the consistency would come in with that. So that's 2.1A. 2.1B would be that it would, vibrant learning experiences within the same system. We would collect some percentages of students from districts and schools on the percentage of students who are engaged in vibrant learning experiences. So again, those collecting from the districts their choices and how they give their students those different opportunities and the percentage of students that would be engaged in those. So you can see here, there was, again, a little bit variability on the results of the vibrant learning experiences. You can see 34 of the respondents supported that federal based, whereas 17 said they'd rather have the state, and then 23 said they didn't want either of those. So, you know, there's a good bit of discussion there on this. You can see from the slide that there are people that think that there's, again, challenges that with the capacities within the school districts and with the schools, and then how it would be implemented. Again, as Dr. Webb said about the competency base, I think that some of those same comments could be made here on these vibrant learning experiences. So again, the vibrant learning experiences have the variability as well. So I'll stop there.
Any thoughts? I think the tough part about vibrant learning experience is the operational definition, or what is the definition of vibrant learning, and how do you give local flexibility for that? And then, but also ensuring that students have those type of opportunities across the Commonwealth. Vibrant learning is how it's defined in one district is going to look different than another district, but also too, some districts have more opportunity than other districts. They may have more community partners. They may have more, just resources available to their students. But on the other hand, too, I think we also have a responsibility for some place-based education within our district to say this is what's available in our community, because we want our students to come back. We want them to serve. If that's their goal, we want them to know that these are the opportunities you have in Pike County or in Greene County, wherever we go, or Edmonson County. These are the opportunities you have locally. If you want to stay home and still serve globally, you have these opportunities right here at home. But also, too, how do we push students out to be proud of where we're from? And then if you've seen a defensive learning, those are powerful items to see students say, this is what I learned in my school. This is why I learned it in my school. And this is how it got me ready for what's next. And when a child puts all that together, when a student puts all that together, it's magical. So again, those vibrant learning experiences are very important. So how do we make sure that they have those opportunities across the state? And what does that look like? I don't want to define that for each person. That's why we have the local accountability piece too. How does that fit in? Does it fit into a local accountability piece that we just demonstrate versus do we have it as part of an accountability score for the state? So there's a lot of questions here as far as it relates to vibrant learning too.
The last comment I would say, sir, is based on what you just said. I go back to my comment earlier. Everything does not have to be part of that score or that star or that color. You can have those vibrant learning experiences, because I read up there when the comments was fair and equitable. Sure, as soon as you implement something like that, there's going to be districts that say, well, of course, that district's got more opportunities. That high school's 2,000 kids, they've got 6,000 opportunities. But if it's local and districts have autonomy, yet they have to prove quality and report it, it doesn't have to be part of that score. But yet everybody's giving those kids those experiences. I just hope we can move away from everything we do has to be justified by putting a number on it.
That's a good point.
Thank you.
Very good point. Other comments? Well, if it pleases the chair, we'll put out a survey to try to gather this information again and give you that opportunity to have those comments. And we'd love to hear back and we can compile that. Is that okay, Dr.
Yes.
Brewer? Can you do that for us? And Chairman, are you okay with that also?
Yes.
All right.
Sounds great.
Then I'll turn it back over to you. And ladies, thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you
Enjoyed the
so much.
conversation. Good to see you.
Appreciate this productive meeting and all of the feedback that you've given. Again, this is very important work that we do every time we meet. So with that being said, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion we adjourn.
Second. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you all.